All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Uh, Thank you all for listening. Always appreciate that, especially in the down weeks, and boy, have we had a few of those recently. But some good stuff is on the horizon. Um, Speaking of, we'll be reviewing UFC on ESPN 61, a card so bad they basically bailed on the entire notion of showing tweets about it. Like during the broadcast. I mean, when the entire discourse around your event online is most of the people who watch most of your cards going, this is crap, do not watch it. Something kind of got sideways there. Full disclosure, if I was not being paid to watch this, I would not have watched it. Not one bit of it. Um, Made a decent intro for the boxing event because Top Rank had a really good, actually, main card of boxing that came on. The main card started a little bit after the UFC event ended. You got a fight of the year contender, beautiful knockout in the main event. So actually, Top Rank had a pretty good evening. Um, so we'll review that event. And we'll preview UFC 305. They're back in Australia. We've got a title fight. It's actually an okay card, so we'll be happy about that. And then I don't have a lot of news this week, but I do have to. There's some that needs to be discussed. So that's what we got on the agenda this evening. Interact with the product a little bit, like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, blah blah blah. You all know the drill. Um, Sharing around on social media or with people in your personal life is the other good thing that I would appreciate. But if all you're doing is listening, that is more than enough. There's a lot of MMA content out there, and I am profoundly grateful that y'all choose mine as part of your experience. Or if you just use this to put your kids to bed, because I don't know. I somebody told, not about this podcast, some others I've done where the feedback was just, yeah, you guys are fine, but really there's a couple of your episodes that my kids just love listening to when they go to sleep. And I will take that. You know what? I am not too proud to accept that. If my cadence and tone and whatnot helps some child sleep and helps you get more sleep as a result of it, I'm grateful for that. I will take it. All right. Yeah, that's it for the preamble, I guess. So let's jump on into this, shall we? So UFC on ESPN 61. Um, Only 10 fights on the card. Had a couple fall out. Um, we lost Alon Nascimento and Jafel Filio. I think Nascimento had an issue there. Yeah, some kind of illness. We also lost Yusaku Kinoshita and Johnny Parsons. Something with Parsons. So there was some other of there was a, I want to say there was another fight a while back that was supposed to be on this one that also got the axe. But anyway, 10 fights, which, if they didn't have to stretch 10 fights over 6 hours, that would be good. That'd be really good. We had three weight misses. Um, Chepe Mariscal weighed 149.5 pounds for a featherweight fight. That's pretty bad. Danny Barlow weighed 171 and a quarter. He claims that he could have cut the last quarter of a pound, but the doctors stopped him. Fair enough. And Chelsea Chandler weighed 141 for a bantamweight bout. So, congratulations, you're 5 pounds over the grace limit you get for non-title fights. I rag on women's bantamweight a lot, and I'm going to do more of that again in this podcast in a minute or two. If you want to understand everything you need to know about the utter wasteland, like the vault dwellers are like coming out and wandering around the wasteland of women's bantamweight. It's that bad. Chelsea Chandler came into this fight ranked 14th as the number 14 contender. Okay. Now you might go, well, that's not, terrible, right? Potentially makes sense. Except Chelsea Chandler in her entire UFC career has never made bantamweight. She had a catchweight for her UFC debut, 140 pounds. She fought at featherweight, losing to Norma Dumont. She allegedly tried to get down to bantamweight in March of this year. She beat Josiane Nunes, but weighed 137. Then this time around, looks like she didn't even try. I mean, you're missing by that much. Something has gone radically wrong. Weighed 141. So despite never actually fighting in the weight class, she was ranked. That's how bad that division is. That's comical. That is just, again, it's comical. So, 3 weight misses, only 10 total fights. I'll get this out of the way now. This was not a good card, just for the record. But how did the predictions go? The only thing I changed my mind on, when I saw them next to each other, I switched from Toledo Alencar to Luciano. I did not. I haven't seen because I haven't seen their contender series fight. But when I saw that Luciano was like 5 inches taller with 7 inches of reach advantage, yeah, that's a lot. I still could have gotten that one very wrong. Wouldn't have mattered to me, but just for the record, that one I did kind of swap my opinion on. Other than that, 8-2 out of the 10 fights. The only ones I got wrong, I got Williams and Jonathan Diniz wrong, which I maintain my analysis was correct. Didn't expect Carl Williams to decide that spending 12 minutes standing with a vastly superior kickboxer was a good idea. Just didn't see that one coming. So there was that. And Toshiomi Kazuma defeating I heard them pronounce it. They don't do the CH thing. I think it's just the H. I mean, it's spelled with a CH, but it's Cyprus. So, but anyway, he beat Haralampos Grigoriou. Those are the only ones I got wrong, and I do think my analysis was probably off on Grigoriou and Kazuma, but we'll get to that when we get to the fight. I don't expect this to take very long, and you can see the timestamp, so hopefully it doesn't. But other than that, yeah, Gutierrez got a last-minute change of opponent. He was supposed to fight. Because I picked him, and I was not certain about that. Who was he supposed to fight? Basharat. Right. He's supposed to fight Javid Basharat, and instead got a guy who was going to be on the Contender Series, and got bumped up, Quang Le, who I don't know if he's the first Vietnamese fighter in the UFC. I think he is. If he's not the first, he's certainly the first in a really long time. I know Nam Phan has Vietnamese ancestry. I don't know if he was born there or not. I'd have to double check. So forgive me. I'm not trying to. Dude, I just name dropped Nam Phan. All right. If that doesn't tell you how much I'm trying to think about some of this stuff. Oh, he's been a little bit on my mind because, oh, that poor guy. His language center is mush. If you've seen a recent interview with him, it's, yeah, that's not good. That's really not good. And he's not a guy who, like, got violently knocked out, I think, at any real point in time. Just a lot of the sparring, a few too many wars, and The physical costs of pursuing this are legitimate and should never be forgotten. Anyway, so there was that. I had no problem keeping Gutierrez as my pick there. If I was going to pick him against Javid Basharat, I was no problem picking him against the late notice replacement. Yeah, so that was it. So again, 8-2, which I'm cool with. I'm pretty cool with that one. Um, so year to date now, I am 227-100 with 4-0 contests. Feeling pretty good, honestly. Things kind of going along. So yeah, I am I've been enjoying this more than I thought I would. The whole process of like keeping track of this, because ups and downs, and just try to learn from the downs as much as you can. But that's where we are. So I'll try to be very brief to these fights. Most of these are not worth delving too deeply into. Main event: Sergey Spivak mercifully arm bars Marcin Tybura 144 of the first. Heavyweight is so bad that arm bars from the guard are back. Because Spivak, I mean, I'm kind of joking around about that, but one, heavyweight does suck, and I want to talk about that in a second. But two, this wasn't even like the best version of an armbar from the guard. Spivak does kind of get his hips turned, but he more like, I don't know if this is brilliant or like very sloppy work. And I mean, Spivak is not some scrub, but doing things in real life, sometimes you just take what's given to you. But it almost looked like instead of getting around properly because you want to get your hips all the way around so you're perpendicular, ideally. He almost just gets like at a slight angle, and then he doesn't really shrimp. But when I describe that motion, it'll get you what he's doing with his body. Almost times it with Tabora like trying to posture forward too much. Because Tabora is not reading the hip movement at all, and I think there was a little bit of like reading the motion from Spivak, and then Tabora overcommits his weight going forward as he's kind of trying to posture through a bit of a higher guard. And Spivak doesn't get all the way around, but is able to assist that motion, get his legs enough in play, get the arm, get the verbal tap, get the win, avenging a loss from like 4 years ago. Was that in 2020 or was it earlier? Hang on, let me check. Yeah, it was February of 2020. So fun fact about this fight. This was the first heavyweight fight in the UFC to be finished via armbar in like 4 years. The last armbar that ended a UFC heavyweight fight was Fabricio Verdum catching one on Alexander Gustafsson. I mean, neither of those guys are in the UFC anymore. So who the heck knows, but like, that's just not a thing that you see at heavyweight. And I mean, even Verdum didn't, if memory serves, he didn't get that one from guard. He had Gustafsson's back. And Verdum's arm bars from the back were exceptional. And yeah, he hit Gustafsson with one of those. So armbar from the guard from Sergey Spivak. What a time to be alive. So yeah, Spivak just wants to fight someone ranked above him next. Sure. You know, I'll try to be brief about this because I don't need to wax too poetic here. But if you don't know this YouTube channel, but the Napoleon Blown Apart YouTube channel, which does a lot of like long form essays and like sort of explanation journalism kind of stuff related to MMA. This last like few days, he dropped his 2-hour sort of look at the UFC career of Brock Lesnar. Now, because he's fairly in depth, he actually talks about some of the build-up, how we got to where we got to, backstory. Watch his stuff. It's great. His very long retrospective on The Ultimate Fighter is tremendous. And if you have the time and the inclination, definitely give it a listen. It's good. But um, point I'm raising here, the story of Brock is bizarrely enough the story of the UFC heavyweight division actually getting a little bit of life injected into it. And that may strike you as odd, especially if you're a newer fan, but understand something for just a minute, if you don't mind. The history of the UFC heavyweight title begins weirdly, because it kind of grows out of the super fight title, sort of. Um, I mean, it's just weird because a lot of those first champions either couldn't muster a defense of the belt, like Mark Coleman didn't. He got knocked out and he lost to Maurice Smith. Smith, I don't think ever like the first 4 UFC heavyweight champions. I think have one successful title defense between them. Let me double check that. I want to say that is correct. Hang on. So, yeah, you get Coleman beating Dan Severn, and Severn, I think, had been the super fight champion or something to that effect. Um, anyway, Coleman beats him, loses to Smith. Smith loses. Smith does get one defense. He beats Tank Abbott. Where did Coleman do that? That might be erroneously listed. I think Smith gets one. Then Randy Couture beats Maurice Smith. Randy Couture then basically gives the belt back as he gets involved very quickly in one of his many contract disputes with the UFC. In fact, if you trace the lineal heavyweight title, it goes with Couture to some of his rings fights, and it winds up with, doesn't it wind up with Ensign Inoue? Boy, that's another weird name. But the weirdness of that is, like, if you track the lineal belt, it doesn't get reunified with the heavyweight belt until I think Francis beats Stipe for the belt. It's really weird. But lineal titles are tracked like that, and they can be just very weird. So Couture gives it back. Boss Rutan beats Kevin Randleman via somewhat controversial decision. I don't disagree with the decision for the record, but Boss then vacates to try and cut down to 205, and he winds up having some of his injuries act up, especially his neck injuries, and he winds up retired for many, many years. Then Randleman wins the vacant belt, gets one successful defense. Couture wins it back, defends it twice against Pedro Hizzo. But again, Couture's relationship with the UFC is pretty fractious at this point. And even in 2000 with this, and 2001, Couture at that point is pushing 40. So there's just not a lot there. Then Josh Barnett wins it and is stripped of it for a failed drug test. And, I'm sure him trying to renegotiate his contract with the UFC had nothing to do with the Nevada State Athletic Commission showing up to drug test at this point in time. Yeah. So then Rico Rodriguez beats Randy Couture. Rodriguez loses it to Tim Sylvia. Little bit of a miracle that Rodriguez didn't get stripped of the belt, because boy was that guy on a bunch of stuff. Sylvia gets one defense against a guy who misses weight and fails a drug test. That Sylvia fails a drug test too. Comes back, fights for the vacant belt against Frank Mir. Mir beats him, breaks his arm. Then Mir winds up stripped of the belt after he's in the motorcycle accident. Then we get this giant, long time of Andrei Arlovsky and Tim Sylvia dancing around each other. And It's all kind of terrible, guys. If you've never seen some of these fights, look, some of these are good. I don't mean to imply that these are all terrible fights. Rico Rodriguez and Randy Couture is one of those like classic fights. It's from the dark ages of the sport, and people don't talk about it a whole lot, but it's a very pro wrestling bout in the sense that there's a clear narrative and momentum shifts that come about. So if you haven't seen that one, definitely, kind of worth a watch. Um, but most of this is it's just not good. I mean, they actually get Randy Couture. So Tim Sylvia winds up back with the belt and has two of the most lackluster title defenses you'll ever see. His third fight with Andrei Arlovsky is, I kid you not, one of the three worst UFC title fights ever. Yeah, I'm putting it up there with, like, Rose and Carla. Like, it's bad. And then he has a really lackluster win over Jeff Monson that nobody remembers for good reason. Then Randy Couture comes out of like retirement in his 40s and beats the brakes off Tim Sylvia. You're like a 43-year-old guy on the. I mean, saying Randy Couture was ever on the couch is a bit much, but you know what I mean. Coming off the bench. Pride always had the better heavyweight division by a mile. But it's not really until Brock comes along, and by this point Pride is dissolved, but they don't get all the Pride talent. They get some of it. They get Big Nog, but definitely like already showing his age, Big Nog. I love Nogueira, but dude was well past it at that point. The fact that he had as much success in the UFC as he did is a testament to all kinds of things about him. But yeah, Brock actually brings a little bit of like life to this whole enterprise. And then Kane and JDS get rushed into their trilogy, which somewhat unfortunately kind of ruins JDS for a little bit. But like even Verdum, even Verdum upsetting Kane, like still had a little bit of that, a little bit of the magic. I hate to blame Stipe for, it's not Stipe's fault. He was a very good fighter, the most successful UFC heavyweight champion ever. But his reign did coincide with a lot of that again, kind of taking the old nosedive. And it's still not in a good place. The top's log jammed. You've got the future of this whole weight class. And the UFC president is out there saying that he doesn't deserve anything. Like, I don't think Tom Aspinall wasn't even in the UFC the last time Stipe Miocic won a fight. I'd have to double check that, but I feel like that's right. I mean, but it's a mess, and there's a lot of reasons for it, but I've wasted enough time talking about that. But this is, heavyweight. Co-main event. If there's two fights I'm going to recommend you look up from this card. This is one of them. Chepe Mariscal defeats Damon Jackson via unanimous decision, 2 30-25s and a 30-26. Going 10-8 in the second feels... I don't hate it, but it feels a little generous. These two came at each other, both of them, like they were shot out of cannons at each other, just hell for leather from the start. Brutal body work, knees to the body in the clinch. This is how you do like clinch fighting rather than just like clinch jockeying. Knees, elbows, breaks, pocket exchanges, re-enter the clinch. Mariscal's gas tank is kind of bonkers because he fights at absurd paces, and not just this time. Like this is kind of his normal, which is nuts. He's a little bit of a wild man, but if you're like isn't he like the primary training and sparring partner for Gaethje? I'm sure that will instill in you a certain way of fighting. some really nice scramble work on the ground. There's an interesting bit in the second round when Mariscal tried to get the back. He had a ride position, but went to actually like take the back. Unfortunately, had the wrong hook in as they got towards the ground, which let Jackson spin around, get on top, and Jackson on top is no joke. Then he tried to take the back, but wound up sliding off. Some there's some really good mat returns actually from Mariscal too. Hit a nice judo throw in the first one. Not the prettiest thing you'll ever see, but good grief was it nasty. Just launching Jackson at the ground. Um, so 10-8 in the second, again, a little generous, but I can't tell you how much this card needed at least one fight that was good. This was a good fight. Jackson just kind of faded down the stretch. Um, yeah, I went 10-8 third. Sucks that Mariscal missed weight because for the record, no fight of the night bonus was awarded. This was the fight of the night. Frankly, they should have just thrown both. The UFC's policy of if you miss weight, we don't bonus you. First of all, it's a suggestion. I had some people like push back on me when I put out there on Twitter, you know, they might be throwing bonus money at Mariscal despite the weight miss and the usual cavalcade of, no, the UFC doesn't do that, at which point I tune you out at that point because if I bring up the history of the UFC actually doing that, which they have, it just, you don't want to, people like that don't want to listen. The UFC has broken that guideline several times, and on a card this dire, feels like at a bare minimum they should have been willing to throw one of those, even if you don't want to put both $50,000 checks for Jackson, at least give him one, because, man, they saved this card. This fight being good, really good actually, and then a fast main event saved everything else about this because the rest of this sucked. Well, there's one other fight I'm going to recommend, but by and large, the rest of this sucked. Good fight. Look this one up. Next up, Danny Barlow defeated Nikolai Veretennikov via split decision. 229-28 for Barlow, fine. 30-27 for Veretennikov. Giving Veretennikov the second, I think, is foolish. This was Jaron Villel, which that man is a very poor judge. Has a very poor track record. 29-28 either way I think is fine. I was 29-28 Veretennikov, but this was just a very, very low activity fight. Very low. And Barlow kind of got the edge in the first, I guess, for two of the judges, but I didn't give him the first, but this low activity, like, you can't... I almost don't want to get up in arms over the 30-27 because all three rounds were just so bleh that I can't say like full on awful worst scorecard I've ever seen because of how the fight went. I can say as a judge you should at least have enough sense to know who won the second round out of this fight. And frankly the third, but he got the third right. But the second round, like, that one should be almost required study for, hey, this is a really low activity round where not a lot happens, but there is a fairly non-controversial winner to the round. Let's just put it that way. Not a good fight. Again, super, super low action. Bantamweight Chris Gutierrez defeated Kwong Lee via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. Lee got the second, I think. Pretty sure that's what I gave him. Gutierrez, good. Here's the thing about Gutierrez. He's pretty good, but his game is kind of limited. He has limited his game, is a better way to phrase that. It's not that he's limited, but for a variety of reasons, he has limited his offensive game. He's got good kicks, especially his calf kicks, but if those don't produce the kind of results that really opens up the rest of his game, He just kind of sticks with them as they don't do much. Or he's waiting for something to develop that never does. I don't know. Um, he got a win here, and I give him credit for that, so I'm not trying to bury the guy. But does seem like there's been some offensive potency lost in a lot of his game over the last, like, 3-ish fights. Yana Santos defeated Chelsea Chandler via unanimous decision, 229-28 and a 30-27. Chelsea Chandler should not be in the UFC. And I'm not just saying that because she missed weight again. Her skill level is not commensurate with even women's bantamweight. She shouldn't be here. Here's the other fight I might recommend. So Toshiomi Kazama defeats Charalampos Gregorio via triangle choke, 155 of the second. Kazama's wrestling is actually pretty solid. He had some good mat returns in the first round. He had a really nice butterfly sweep, actually, the brief moments he went up on his back in that first round. A really nice one, actually. Second round, he gets dropped by Gregorio really hard. Gregorio nearly gets a finish, but, man, Gregorio's gas tank is a problem. If he's gassing out this hard, look, Kazama fights at a fairly high pace for bantamweight, but you shouldn't be that gassed that quickly. The triangle choke was in, but he didn't even fight it. Like, he was just kind of, he had his big moment of offense where he dropped him and then followed up, landed some gnarly elbows, but couldn't string enough of it together in a concerted enough fashion to get the stoppage, and then didn't have anything left. It's just kind of how that played out. So, but there's some interesting MMA wrestling and a little bit of guard work from Kazama, so might be worth your time looking up if you really want something else from this card to find. Carol Hossa defeated Pani Kianzad via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Hossa just really good kicks to the thigh and to the calf, inside and outside. Pretty decent movement. These two, when they got into the clinch, actually did a number on each other. Hossa clearly getting the better of it, but she landed some really gnarly elbows, so not a terrible fight, but, mostly forgettable. Heavyweight, Jonathan Deniz defeated Carl Williams unanimous decision, 30-27, which was my scorecard, but the third round, Then 29-28 twice. Williams attempted all of like 2 takedowns in the first 2 rounds, at least to my eye. One of them, after he got rocked, he kind of like reached to kind of clinch up. He just spent the first 2 rounds kickboxing with a much better kickboxer and losing out on it. The only way he was ever going to win this was with his wrestling. While I understand the desire not to be overly predictable, you should have thrown what you were doing out after the first round. That needed to be something you recognized was not working, was not giving you what you wanted, was not getting you to where you needed to go, even if it was part of a setup. Because as soon as he got a takedown in the third round, like, he did what he normally does, and you should have been doing that from the start, man. And I know you can't do it right off the bat, but even the intent was just off. Just very off. Featherweight Yusuf Zalal defeated Jarno Aarons via rear naked choke, 352 of the first. Fine enough fight. And kicking everything off, Stephanie Luciano defeated Talita Alankar via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Luciano just longer, taller, fought long, moved well, avoided the clinch, avoided too much grappling. Not a very good fight. Really not a very good fight, but Luciano did get a win. I already mentioned your bonuses. Fight of the night was nothing. Should have been Mariscal and Jackson. They should have bonused him even though he missed weight because, good grief, this card so badly needed it. Your performances of the night went to, guess what, the 3 finishes. So, Sergey Spivak, Toshiomi Kazama, and Yusuf Zalal. I don't disagree with that. This card sucked. Um, my full report is in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com if you want to go read that. I encourage you to read that instead of looking up any fights other than the two I've mentioned. This was... I think I first heard this articulated, this point I'm about to make. I think it was Brian Campbell I first heard say it. Long time like boxing writer and part of the Morning Combat duo at this point. Um, I think he's the first one I heard describe this era of the UFC as the content era. And I think he's right, and I can't unsee it. Um, the UFC doesn't care about how good most of these events are. If they don't have to sell tickets, they really don't care. And even if they do have to sell tickets, they go to markets that are kind of starved enough for the UFC that they aren't going to be very discerning. Um, so there's that. But all they care about is hitting the hitting their contractual minimums, and the individual quality is utterly immaterial to their check from ESPN. And yeah, it's not good. And I saw the slightly cynical take or overly frustrated take. So the UFC recently has been putting out some videos. They're like, "Hey, watch this bit of a fight, and we will turn the commentary off." Hey, I've been subscribed to your stupid service for long enough to remember when you offered that. That was a feature you used to be able to turn on Fight Pass, was turn off commentary. Turn on corner mics. You could just listen to someone's corner the whole time through the fight. That was interesting, and I imagine a lot of corners were like, we don't like that very much. But that was interesting, and not listening to some of your brain-dead commentary was nice. And now it's like, hey, super special thing that we release bits of on occasion. And once again, I remember when this was just a feature of the service you provided, and now it's... yeah. But someone did the, free markets, capitalism drives innovation and whatnot. And then cynically went, until you get all the, guaranteed money. I'm just compelled to point out, one, it's not necessarily capitalism that drives innovation. It is competitive marketplaces. Capitalism supports competitive marketplaces. Bad capitalism doesn't. And real capitalism really opposes monopoly, because that is not to get too deep into this, but you want markets to be free and fair, and a monopolistic position means the market is certainly not fair, and pretty definitively, as a result of that, not free. So the people who complain about this as a backdoor way to go, we need uber government regulation, because I've seen those people. Look, I don't. The extent to which government should be involved in markets is mostly to prevent unfair monopolies, or even fair monopolies, you could argue. To the extent that a fair monopoly even exists isn't just a contradiction in terms. So I'm fine with that, but there's a lot of almost bad faith takes about it at this point. But when you have a stagnant product, because there is no such thing as a monopoly in human history that has ever served the customer's best interest. Ever. Does not happen. You might obtain monopolistic status largely serving customer interests. That's possible. Once you're entrenched in that, though, that goes out the window. And that's where the UFC is on that curve. Part of how they got to where they are, ruthless but fair business practices, and serving the interests of the fan base. There was a time when that was somewhat in alignment. Now they don't care. I've really come around to that notion that the actual audience is about the third most important body that the UFC considers. I didn't think I'd come around on that one, but realistically, yeah, I've started to get there. So anyway, read the report. Don't watch the card. Watch the two fights. Don't watch anything else. Not good. Very, very not good. All right, that's me getting off of my horse about that, and we should be. Make sure that's all set. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, UFC UFC 305. A good card, finally. We've had not a lot of those recently. The UFC this coming Saturday will be in Perth. And we have a pretty solid pay-per-view card. This is not the best pay-per-view card, but it's good. What am I complaining? Okay, there's my complaint. I have one complaint about the main card. Exactly one. The rest, no, the rest were good. The rest is quite good. So, main event for the UFC Middleweight Championship. Dricus du Plessis, newly crowned middleweight champion, defends against former two-time champion Israel Adesanya. In fact, the only two-time champion in UFC middleweight history. Everybody else did not retain that belt. I think the first guy gave it up. And Evan Tanner lost to Franklin. Franklin lost to Silva. Silva held on to it forever and a day. He lost to Weidman. Weidman never got it back. Rockhold never got it back. Bisping never got it back. GSP got it and vacated it. Whitaker was then promoted. Whitaker almost got it back, but not quite. So yeah. First two-time middleweight champion, is he? Going to be the first three-time middleweight champion. You know, not just three-time middleweight, but three different title reigns in the UFC, even if it's all in the same weight class. That's pretty rarefied air. Not too many other people have done that. Randy did it. Randy Couture. Because he had three heavyweight title reigns and one is light heavyweight. Brandon Moreno might do it. Eventually. Anybody else come close? George, two-time welterweight. I don't think there's been a repeat lightweight champion. No, there hasn't. More I think about it. I don't think there's been a... Because that was Pulver, then he vacated, and they just kind of folded the division for a little bit. Then Shirk, Penn, Edgar, Henderson, Pettis, Dos Anjos, Alvarez, McGregor, Khabib, Oliveira, Makhachev, with a couple of other interim belts thrown in along the way there. Yeah, so point being, three reigns is rare. That would be super impressive if Izzy can pull that off. Man, last year around the same time, there was actually heat on this. There was some hype for this fight, and that's kind of evaporated. Not sure exactly why. I mean, I could be kind of a weirdo and blame Sean Strickland, not, but I don't know that I should, because he won the belt and then lost it, close fight with Duplessis to lose it, but there might be something to the fact that not just that there was somebody between that fight coming together, but kind of how those fights played out. Because Sean Strickland just has a slightly weird fighting style. Hopefully, that's not a controversial sentiment. There's a lot that's good about it. I certainly am not trying to disparage the guy. Um, but then to also arrive at the point where the roles from how we got excited for this are reversed, because that was Izzy as champion and Duplessis as challenger, and now that's been flopped. And Duplessis getting the belt on a very close fight feels a little bit like it took some of the sting out of some of the heat off of that. And Adesanya's been out of action for a little bit. I mean, not forever, but what, year and change? It'll be about a year by the time this fight comes back around. This is a really tough fight to call. Duplessis on the feet is awkward in ways that can benefit him, especially against someone like being awkward against Adesanya is actually a bit of a benefit to you, especially early while he's getting a read on you, because he's used to getting reads on some very traditional stuff. So when you're a little bit awkward early, that can actually throw off. Be awkward early or be random late against guys with kind of the generalized style that Adesanya brings. The same was true of Anderson Silva, by the way. Do something a little bit awkward and unexpected early, and then, or later on in a fight, try something a little bit outside the box that he's just not expecting you to do. But the more you do kind of what's expected especially after someone like that gets a read on you, the worse that's going to go for you. So there's a little bit of earliness that might be able to help. Duplessis is at middleweight, fairly resilient. Um, got a good chin. A little bit repetitive in his attacks. His takedown game could be an interesting wrinkle here. Adesanya defending takedowns against the fence is very, very good. I mean, world class. Open space is a bit of a different animal for him. Now, I'm sure he's been addressing some of that. He's a very intelligent fighter. But that's still a little bit different. I mean, he stopped, Jan Blachowicz from taking him down when they were against the fence at light heavyweight, and Jan, a burly man at that weight class. But in open space, he struggled a lot more, and I wonder how that'll play out. Duplessis' defense is a little bit of a question mark, and that's a bad question mark to have against Adesanya. It really is the defense for me that's kind of my big hang up here. It's not at all impossible for Duplessis to replicate elements of what Strickland did, to kind of disrupt some of Adesanya's normal rhythm and normal game. But Strickland made that work in no small part because he was able to stop all of Adesanya's counters from coming back at him with good defense. And I'm not quite as sure about Duplessis' defense. I'm not one of these guys who's like buying into a lot of the there's a lot of talk around this fight that I don't find useful. Um, and that's muddying the waters for a lot of people on this. I'm gonna asterisk this one because I do want to do a little bit more tape study. At the moment, I'm leading Adesanya. Not by a huge margin, and this one I might change my mind on. Um, but the layoff I actually think will do Adesanya good because we're only talking about like 11 months. It's not even a full year. Is he's 35 though? 35 at middleweight is not the same as 35 at lightweight, of course, but that guy's also been doing this a long time. Whereas Duplessis only 30. And Duplessis has not lost at middleweight since 2014. In his fifth fight when he fought Gareth McClellan. His only other loss is at welterweight when he got knocked out by Roberto Soldic. That was his last loss. It was 2018. He's got it. I do think he has to get this fight to the ground at some point. Preface that. I don't think he can just win. Given his style, I don't think he can win a straight like MMA version of kickboxing fight with Adesanya. I'm not sure how in the cards that is for him, but if he can mix in elements of the grappling, he's a strong guy. And Izzy's been getting jacked, but Duplessis is a very strong guy and is used to carrying a lot of that weight. And his ground game is actually pretty solid and built around a lot of his physical attributes. Um, so at the moment, my thought is it's winnable for Duplessis, but I do lean towards Adesanya ever so slightly. Neither guy, I don't think there's an outcome in this fight that could surprise me. Either guy could win a decision. Either guy could win a clear decision. Either guy could win a close split decision. Either guy could damage. If Adesanya gets actually knocked out, I'm not knocking Duplessis here. That would surprise me more because Izzy has only been dropped once in his entire MMA career, and that wasn't even Pereira, right? It was actually Strickland that technically dropped him. So if he's able to like knock him out cold, that would be a little surprising to me. But a strike-related finish of some kind, not gonna shock me. And ditto submissions for either guy. Be a little more surprising if Izzy caught one. Has he got a submission win? Sorry, I'm spending way too much time on this fight. Let me check real fast. No, he doesn't. Okay. If Izzy pulls off a submission, I'll be a little surprised. Not shocked, but that's probably of all the possible outcomes, that would probably be the least likely, is my hunch. Now watch it happen, and I just look like an idiot. But least likely doesn't mean at all like unlikely, just least likely. But that's a good fight. That was a good fight the first time they teased it. It's still a pretty darn good fight. So, and a little more tape study for me on both of those guys before I really finalize things. Co-main event, another good one. Kai Kara-France, two former flyweight title challengers. Kara-France, wait, he only fought for the interim, didn't he? Yeah, so Kai Kara-France on a two-fight losing streak, lost an interim title fight with Brandon Moreno. He was doing okay in that fight. I think he'd won, the second, and then was winning the third before that body kick folded him up. That was a close fight. I don't mean he was running away with it, but I think I had it around a piece going into the third, and I think he was winning more of the third. Last time out, he lost a split decision to Amir Albazi. That was a little over a year ago. So he really does kind of need the win. He's fighting Steve Erceg, who most recently had a real shot at beating Pantoja for that belt. And made a very odd decision in the fifth round that probably cost him. But that was his first loss since 2017, first loss in the UFC. This is a really good fight. I like this a lot. I'm leaning Erceg. Not trying to discount Kai Kara France at all, but yeah, I just like Erceg. I've been kind of on the Erceg bandwagon. He got rushed a little bit into that title fight and still almost won it. Um, but yeah, going with Erceg, good co-main event. Next up, this will be fun. Dan Hooker and Mateusz Gamrot. Yes, please. Dan Hooker coming off a split decision win over Jalen Turner. He stopped Claudio Puelles before that with a nice body kick. That Jalen Turner fight was kind of a war. That wound up being an okay fight, a pretty good fight actually. Gamrot is coming off of a win over Rafael dos Anjos. His only losses in the UFC, dropped a split decision in his UFC debut, then lost to Beneil Dariush a couple of years ago. The Fiziev fight unfortunately ended with the knee injury. That was really unfortunate because those two were starting to get going. I was really looking forward to that one too. So this is a good fight. Dan Hooker that guy is willing to just go into the pits of hell with you. It's kind of not healthy. I don't know how he's going to do with someone who is as concerted a wrestler as Gamrot. That's not been something he's had to fight off a lot of recently, and it's not something he's had the best success with overall. Yeah, I'm going to go with Gamrot. Um, my rooting interest might be more with Hooker because I like his fights more, a little bit more, but Gamrot seems like the more intelligent pick. My only major complaint about the main card, heavyweights, because screw you, Tai Tuivasa and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I don't know that I can pick Tai Tuivasa to win at this point. He's on a 4-fight losing streak. He's been stopped in all of those. And look, when there was the 3-fight stretch of Cyril Gane, Sergey Pavlovich, and then Alexander Volkov, I was trying to be understanding. Like, that's a rough stretch. That's a former interim champion, a former title challenger, and one of the more just rock solid, top of the division guys in Volkov. So that's a rough stretch for anybody. Getting choked out in the first round by Marcin Tybura, though, that's a bit more troubling. Rozenstruik will strike with him, I'm fairly sure. He's been a little bit just up and down for a while. What are the odds on this one? Odds are fairly heavily for Rozenstruik. I mean, at this point, I just don't know that I picked Tuivasa to win fights, so I'll go with Rozenstruik. No, it's just a K. Yeah, just a K. So I'll go with Rozenstruik, but not looking forward to that fight very much. And kicking off the main card, the Leech, Li Jingliang, and Carlos Prates. Lee, let's see, lost to Daniel Rodriguez. He's been out for a while. Jeez, that was 22. He's just under. He is just under 2 years. Yeah, he's going to be like 1 month shy of 2 years. So 23 months. Has he been out of action? Oh, yeah, he had that nasty spine injury last year. He was supposed to fight Chiesa. Hmm, that's tough. Pratas. This is a bit of an interesting fight in some respects. Because Pratas is a guy that they're kind of 19 and 6, 9-fight winning streak, 2-0 in the UFC. Oh man, yeah, he's a guy they actually have some belief in. He folded Charles Radke with that nasty knee to the body. I remember that one. Knocked out Trevin Giles before that. So he's a guy that they've got some belief in. He's the favorite actually over Lee. The layoff, I can see it. Honestly, the layoff's a big part of this. Yeah, I'm actually going to go with the odds here. Um, yeah. That's where we're going to go. So that's your main card. Again, apart from crappy heavyweights. Not bad. On the prelims, heavyweights. Oh, you got, Junior Taffa and Walter Walker. The brother of Johnny Walker. So Junior lost to Marcos Rogerio de Lima back in February. He's 1-2 in the UFC. Losses to Muhammad Usman and the aforementioned de Lima. Walker did not exactly impress in his UFC debut. He's 11-1, coming off that loss to Łukasz Dreszki. Again, Junior is very, very unproven. Super, super close fight. The odds have this as a pick'em. Let me give Walker one more shot here. I mean, I joked about it before, but the Brazilian who trains with all the Russians. I'll give him another chance here. But if he drops this one, oof. Featherweights, Josh Kulabau and Ricardo Ramos. Good on Ramos. Still kicking around. He's been out of action for a bit, hasn't he? How is that man only 29? He looks 10 years older than that. At least 5 years older than that. 1-3 in his last 4. Choked out by both Charles Jourdain and Julian Erosa. That's a rough spot. And Kulabau he's been up and down in the UFC. He's what, 3-1? Yeah. 2-fight losing streak. I feel like this is Hamosh, but I am not all that certain about that. The odds. Where are you? There you are. The odds are with Kulabau. I'm actually going to go Hamosh here. Not entirely sure about that one, but I don't mind being wrong. I try to be correct, but I don't lose my mind over being incorrect. Featherweight, Jack Jenkins and Herbert Burns. I'm not trying to disparage Herbert Burns, but that man has 3-fight losing streak, cardio and fortitude issues. And Jack Jenkins is actually really... Jack Jenkins is pretty good. So, no problem going Jenkins there. I actually think, and I think fairly highly of Jack Jenkins, so. Out of curiosity. Yeah, do we have the odds for this one? Yeah, okay, yeah. Jenkins is going to be like one of the biggest favorites on the card, looks like, so. I'm not alone in that assessment. Let's see. In the early prelims, lightweights, we have Tom Nolan and Alex Reyes. Quick look here. Nolan 7-1. Had some hype coming into his UFC debut and then lost. Got back on the horse with a win over Victor Martinez. Looked pretty good in that fight. Reyes, let's see, 13-4. 0-2 in the UFC? Yeah. Losses to Mike Perry back in 2017. Then that guy missed a boatload of time. Lost to Charlie Campbell his last time out. No problem picking Nolan. This feels like a bit of a showcase for the native Australian. No one's Australian, right? Yeah, they got the bigger star there. Okay. Song next up, welterweight Song Kanan and Ricky Glenn. Song's an interesting one. Only 1-3 in his last 4. That loss to Ian Gary was pretty rough. I mean, he got knocked out by Max Griffin before that. Didn't have much for Kevin Jousset his last time out either. And again, Glenn's a warhorse, man, but he's been out of action since October of 23. He's taken some serious damage his last couple of times out. Both Christos Yagos and Drew Dober did kind of a number on him. That's a tough one. That might be Song. This might be Songs to win. Glenn is a little bit shop worn. Yeah, let me go with Song. That layoff for Glenn was necessary, but it's also been a bit. And kicking everything off, we have Stuart Nickel and Jesus Santos Aguilar. Wait, I am missing one. Yeah, I am. Okay, sorry, I skipped over Casey O'Neill and Luana Santos. My mistake. Um, Probably O'Neill. She's lost her last 2, though. I mean, okay, Jennifer Maya and Ariane Lipski. The Lipski, getting armbarred by Ariane Lipski is, yeah, that's rough. Santos, 8-1. 3-0 in the UFC. Bit of a step up for her, though. Actually, I think I am going to go with Santos. Yeah, let me go with Santos there. And my apologies, I skipped over that one before. Kicking everything off, Stuart Nickel, I already mentioned Stuart Nickel and Jesus Santos Aguilar. The odds are with Nickel. Nickel is 8-0. Let's see. So undefeated. His UFC debut. And Aguilar, this is the Angel of Death. 10-2. No, I think I'm confusing him with someone. I'm confusing him with Kevin Aguilar. This gentleman is 2-1 in the UFC. Yeah, not the guy I was thinking of. Lost to Tatsuro Taira, then rebounded with a couple of wins over Shannon Ross and Mateus Mendonça. This might actually be a decent opener. I don't know enough about Nickel. Odds like him. Let's go with the odds. Sure, why not? And that's where we stand with the picks. So Saturday, UFC 305. I will be in the MMA zone of 411mania.com. Keeping you updated. Y'all know where to find me. Stop by, say hello. I always appreciate that. All right. So let's talk for a minute about Alex Pereira, shall we? This kind of broke before the show last week, and I didn't talk about it because there wasn't a lot of information. I There's a little bit more now, enough so that I feel comfortable mentioning it. Before, yeah, I wasn't sure. So, UFC light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira has been publicly accused of sexual assault. The woman in question, and she did this publicly, she uh, threw it out there on the internet. And if that sounds like I'm being overly judgmental, I'm not trying to be. Like, assuming something happened to her, then she is then like trying to process that is I'm not I'm not casting aspersions there. Part of the reason I didn't say anything about this last week was she had released her first video, which is it's just her allegations, and I don't have a lot of interest in just like regurgitating that if that's all there is. Um, so that's kind of why I left it alone for the moment. Stuff came out, and there seems to be a little something here. How much, I don't know, but there's pictures of the two of them. They did some like light sparring together, which I don't think she's a fighter, but Pereira was. When you're in that position, you do that on occasion. She released some like text messages she had with Pereira's translator slash manager, I think, or one of his handlers. So this isn't coming out of nowhere is the long and the short of that. Then I think one of her friends released a video that because the original allegation included that she and her friend were both assaulted. Her friend denies that happened. Now, so I don't know any more than that at the moment. I don't think anything else has kind of come out about it. Um, I don't know if I don't know. At this point there's enough evidence to conclude that these two were in proximity and this is not the type of claim that anyone outside of it can just dismiss. There seems to be enough evidence that this needs to be like looked at. That doesn't mean that any impropriety happened. It doesn't mean it didn't. I'm not here carrying water for Pereira because the ugliness that came out after this. Good grief. And look, if this woman is proven to be a liar about this, I have almost zero tolerance. I have kind of the same opinion of people who falsely accuse someone of this as I do people who actually commit the crime, and that's yeah, almost no sympathy, which is not the most Christian attitude for me to take, but that's something I get to work out with, with our Savior as I continue living living this life. But so I'm not out here just saying because I'm a big believer in evidence, not which saying that a few years ago got you in trouble, and it kind of did for me. Not huge, nothing major, but I know how fallible our perceptions are, especially our eyes, and I know how fallible memory can be. And I'm not saying something that's not me saying that nothing happened. It's really not. It's me saying the evidence at this point is inconclusive. But I do think there's enough evidence to warrant a serious look at what may have happened. And I don't think that's unfair. Um, so we will kind of try to keep an eye on that. best we can. Um, yeah, so I don't want to say anything that might get me or anyone else in trouble about that because I'm. It sounds like I have like some deep opinion about this, and I really don't. Beyond, I like evidence, and evidence in question at the moment remains inconclusive. And the only thing I might have, if I say what I might have said, then I may as well just say what I was going to say, and only to say the following. Pereira now being at like the height of his popularity, that doesn't mean that people at the height of their popularity should be given the benefit of the doubt. That's really not what the point I'm going to make here. But when you reach kind of a peak like that, you reach this weird intersection of not being able to hide bad things anymore with the potential for opportunists to try to take advantage. I'm not accusing this woman of being an opportunist. This is an observation about the points at which those two things intersect. It's actually why it's very important to thoroughly investigate and adjudicate these things, because the last thing you want is someone to become too entrenched to where they can start getting away with really bad behavior. And if Pereira is guilty of what he's being accused of here, then I don't care how good a fighter you are. You need to be locked up. Or I tend to believe that it's one of the reasons I have such a high standard in my own head about various sexual assault allegations, but I would be perfectly fine with, the physical removal of one's ability to procreate if you commit that crime. But again, that's why I have such a high standard for there better be like no doubt about that one. And this is one of those it's one of those crimes that can wind up in really muddy spots where, maybe you think everything's fine and everything's not fine, but that's not effectively communicated. And this goes both ways, but it is, I think, statistically more likely pardon the bluntness of this, but statistically it's more likely that women will have anxiety or second thoughts, not convey it properly, and then be really hurt and potentially like they feel victimized without properly conveying sentiment when the majority of guys, if you say no, stop, they'll stop. Like if it starts everything's good, and either one of you gets like suddenly for whatever reason no, the vast majority of people will just stop. Like most people are decent about this kind of thing. So convey clearly to each other. Real simple. Not easy. Be very clear about it. Not easy, but that is relatively straightforward. That point there being like I don't know exactly what's up there, but if he is guilty of that, then screw him. I have no patience for people like that. None. But more to come, I would assume, on that. And right now, it's kind of a mess. You've got her accusations and another person that she named and brought into this disagreeing with her recitation of events, and that just complicates things. So try to keep an eye on it, as ugly as that might get. And when I say I hope there's nothing to this, I really do, because I don't want like that kind of thing happening in the world. I know it does, and I know it's awful. sexual assault is one of the worst things you can do to a person. Um, so I say hopefully there's nothing to it. I'm not like that's not me cheerleading like yay Pereira. That's me really hoping that this is some kind of a memory issue or whatnot. That because I just don't like that happening in the world. All right. Downer note there. Let me check Twitter, see if anything crazy is broken news-wise, and if not, we will do plugs and get out of here. Okay, doesn't look like anything new there, so let's do plugs. Monday, I will be hosting Damn You Hollywood. We'll be reviewing Borderlands. Yeah, yeah. Not looking forward to that one. Gonna be quite honest with you. Been a rough couple of days for me in the old content mill between that UFC event and then Borderlands. So, bleh. What are you gonna do? WWE SmackDown on Friday, per usual. UFC 305 on Saturday, and that's all. That's all looking okay. SmackDown seems to be kicking things back into gear after about a month and change of fairly lackluster television, but it seems like that's on the upswing recently, so I'll take that. And yeah, back here next week to review UFC 305 and have a preview. I think we will be previewing. Yes, we will. We will be previewing UFC on ESPN 62 back in the warehouse. It's actually a good main event, believe it or not. Jared Cannonier and Caio Borralho. That's a good main event. How's the rest of that card? Oy, not good. Yeah, the rest of that card is not good. Please don't let anything happen to that main event. That's the only worthwhile fight on this card. All right, but full preview next week, so come on back for that. Thank you all very much, as always, for listening. I appreciate the heck out of you. Stay safe out there, and I mean that. It's getting crazier and crazier by the day. So stay safe, and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.